Flight Boss, bitch, you know, for sure. You're not listening to the Man of the Terry's Moon, Flight Boss, the Archangel Uriel, and I'm here to carry out God duties and motherfucking responsibilities. And right now, I'm going to talk about how did the planets get their names, because a lot of people wondering, like, how did the planets get their names and things of that nature. And people get lost because of the actual names that we give them. And when people are lost in the physical, that's the physical truth is history, time, lineage, and you know what I'm saying, and references and books of things of that nature. But spiritual truth is myth and mythology and mysticism and my story and mystery and mysticism. So once you understand how to decipher between the spiritual realm, which is the frequency vibration, and then the energy realm, which is the non-physical to physical, you will be able to decipher what's actually going on here. So when we talk about how did the planets get their names, now every religion and every ancient text is speaking of the same thing. So when they say the sun god or things of that nature, what it's referring to is the actual spirit that's taking on the actual shape and form at the time. And then once that shape and form die and transform into either lighter or heavier type of form, another spirit can inhabit that body. Now, when we talk about levels of life, the higher level of life lasts a little longer. So we would say 2,000 or 3,000 years or certain things of that nature. So when we hear things about floods or catastrophic events, we're simply talking about stars dying and then it transforming and then another star taking its place and then another spirit being able to inhabit that body. So for the most part, when we talk about how the planets get their names, now when you have to look at it, you have to understand, do not get lost in language, because then you're going to get too lost in the physical. Just take yourself out of the box and look at it from outside, from an outside looking in point of view. Now listen. You call it the sun. That's what it is. So same way you got a name, that's the name you call it. So you don't really know what that is. You just see the shape and form of it. But the name that's given must be what it's pushing off and was being channeled by you, and when it's channeling you and you channeling it push off the certain frequency vibration of the spirit that's within it. So you call it the sun. So right now, with that light that y'all see in the sky right now, the spirit that's in it is the sun, because this is what everyone is programmed to call it. Now you go back in civilization, it may have been called another name, but it's referring to the same thing. You go back another civilization, it may have been called Apollo. You go back to another civilization, it may have been called Helios. You go back to another civilization, it may have been called Christ. It don't matter what situation you go through, they're pointing to the same body. But what you need to understand is there's a different spirit that's taking that body, because that body transforming, once the spirit that was previously in it outweighs it, it goes to another level of life, and then there's another baby level of life ready to take on that form. So that shape and form transform into the stability that the spirit goes in it next, and then the energy it gets off is how people are going to perceive it. So when you hear things like the moon right now, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, think about all the frequency vibrations that's correlated with Mars and what it's attached to. Right now, that's the actual spirit that has ascended and took that shape and form and is in that level of life right now. So how we have to perceive that energy is based upon the spiritual frequency energies it left amongst the earth when it once walked the earth. Maybe 2,000, 3,000, 6,000, how many years, however this works. But once that being was in this level of life, it left a presence here, and the presence was such an influence that this being was able to develop enough experiences and attach enough to its spirit that it was able to take a different body, and that body in that position, that's the level of information that spirit attached to itself, was able to sustain a position to carry out and be a utmost influence for the lesser life that's up under it. So you can be just a piece of that being, because the spirit in that being was already down here. So the only way we know how to channel it is by understanding the mystery of it, the mythology of it. Shit about to die, hold on. But that's why we call it the name. Like, people don't know really why we call it, and they want to tie the history, but there's a reason for everything, because you gotta understand there's a reason for everything. So we not doing nothing but what we always been doing. What you doing now is what we always been doing. This is why you have to stay with the shift, stay with the wave, so you could kind of perceive the realm of reality we in, because a shift is nothing but going to a different wave of consciousness. Us as a collective is in another space, and when we go to another space, the lights and the alignments and things of that nature is correlating in different ways, so the orbs and realities that's being created is differently. Now whether we went higher or lower is just a different realm of reality. So what you need to understand is never be the person that say you know all. Always be the person to say you perceive all, because you could perceive all in a realm of reality, but you may be in a realm of reality that's separate from another realm of reality. So yeah, you could perceive all in the realm of reality you in, but you don't know all because you're not in another realm of reality to perceive that one yet. So to say you know all is to be a fool. So you have to understand that also. So be very careful about the words that you are using. When we say Jupiter, Jupiter, whatever correlated in spirit, whatever like that, and left off the earth when it was on this level of life, that's the energy frequency that we have to channel to understand how it's correlating in this level of life. So since we in that level, in like a cell in one of these organs or something like that, the best way for us to channel ourselves, we are a piece of that. We like offsprings almost. So we have a piece of multiple things, but they are one true thing. So we are the one mixture of it. But even though they're a mixture of something, is just on a higher light, to us, it's like, for an example, you are a mixture of all these things: Venus, Jupiter, all these elements. Now, the way yours correlated together is what makes you. So now you are a unique one right there. So even though it's one, you see how it's still a mixture of a bunch of shit? It's just like that. But so if you was to create, you create your emotions and feelings based upon the mixture, but it becomes one for a lesser life. So a lesser life have many attributes the same way. How you see what I'm saying? So for the most part, it's just, we talking about spirits inhabiting bodies. So when we talk about gods and things of that nature, the true ancients understood that they was worshiping the spirit. They ain't talk about man or anything of that nature. The lie and the Lucifer lie came from the literature of teaching you a concept of man is trying to overthrow God, or man is trying to do this, that, and the third, or man worshiping man, or man overthrowing man, or things of that nature. That was the first lie, the first book. But back then they understood that it was all about the spirit. They worshiped the spirit within the being. So when a child is birthed here, or things of that nature, and then the child starts showing characteristics and traits of certain things that could be perceived as incapable or capable of things of that nature, they would say this child has a spirit of a higher being in it. You know what I'm saying? And this is what developed the concept of children becoming smarter than the parent and things of that. You see what I'm saying? It goes deep into a lot of things, but you have to understand this is why all religions is correlated to planets. Everything is correlated to the planets. Everything is correlated to the stars. This is why you have even misconceptions where you think about Mars. You would say who was the first person who discovered Mars, and then they'd say some shit in the 1600s or something like that. But then the name of the Mars is from some shit that the fucking Rome already discovered, so it confuse you. Like, you'd be like, what the fuck is actually going on here then? Because if they saying we discovered Mars, then what Mars is they talking about back then? A real person? And then they talking about Mars was second to Jupiter and shit, was born by Jupiter and Juno and shit. So it'll confuse you, but really it's just, you need to understand that it's just levels of life, and that level of life once was in this space. So it was in this realm of reality, in your same existence that we are here now in the third dimension, but those beings and things of that. So this is where you have to think about influence. The more it doesn't, this is what we're here to do. You need to separate your mind and your concept and your indoctrination, or your trying to get indoctrinated versions of thinking about God and shit. You need to get that out of your head. If there is a God, but your whole concept is messed up, you go to my other videos for it. But this is what you actually need to understand right now. As far as talking about spirits and planets and things of that nature, and ascend and spirits taking on other bodies and going here, there, this, that, and the third. Influence is what you're here to do. And it doesn't matter what it is. If it's bad to another person, it might be heaven to you. But that doesn't matter. You're here to experience. Now, the bigger the influence, the more experience, the bigger your spirit can take, the more body forms you can take. Now, so when we talk about these names that we give into these planets, these were beings that actually had some form of influence. And so when you look at that now, look at who got some form of influence now. The elites, the people who created the languages, the people who created the indoctrinations of the schools and things of that nature. So when you want to talk about any level of ascension, you need to be looking at these kind of people first. So instead of you being a spiritual hater and coming up with a bunch of religious indoctrinations that these same people who doing what I'm doing came up with their own ideas, since you want to come up, waste your whole life trying to unindoctrinate yourself by getting it, that's the same being indoctrinated. You know what I'm saying? What you need to do is quit being a spiritual hater and get like them. You need to create your own language. You see what I'm saying? You need to reclaim your own land. You know what I'm saying? You need, and it's not about even reclaiming land. That's not even the concept of it. But for the most part, you need to create your own language. You need to create your own emotions and feelings. You need to create your own talents, your own gifts, your own programs, your own entertainment. You see what I'm saying? You need to create all that shit. Don't you know it? And who will stop you? This world is a free world. Look, what you need to understand about spirit and energies is this: they're not a respecter of they're not a respecter of persons. That's another thing. A person who's in that morality have a judgmental type attitude to them. These are the people who need to understand that energies don't respect persons. So it doesn't matter what funk or whatever indoctrination you in, the energy flows where it likes to go. So if you're not aligning yourself into your true nature, you're not going to know what energy resonate with you. So you're just going to find yourself going through life fighting energies, when really you need to find your energy, your pocket, your space, your position, your relativity in this motherfucker shit, so you can start knowing where to go and you don't come to no lost conclusions. You have you end up having direction, insight. You know what I'm saying? It just may be a situation that just you may be so lost in indoctrination, and you might have got to a point where you think you're unindoctrinated and you got so lost into that. It's the same polar you see, it's the same polar opposites. You have to align everything, because everything is here for a reason. And if you think otherwise, that doesn't make sense. Now, that's a thin line between purpose and reason. Purpose, you have to propose to something to have a purpose. So it's like you have to marry something, marry an energy. And then you start, once you propose to something, that's where even the form of marriage came from. Because you have to create a purpose to be with a person. See, then that's when you start getting to proposing and things of that nature. Because once you propose to any frequency vibration, right, now you can start developing purpose to it. But reasoning it's a thin line between the two, because you still have to ask why. You still have to ask, okay, what's the reason that I even gotta have a purpose, or is even not a purpose? See, it's a thin line between. You can't tie reason to purpose at all. So for the most part, what you need to understand is, we always understood that we was worshiping the spirit. And the first lie was making you think we was worshiping the physical. You see what I'm saying? So when you start getting indoctrinated, and the first thing that taught you that, that's where everything come from. That's where everything come from. When really, if everybody understood the spirit, we will all be in good spirits. So it would automatically play out into the things that we do every day, and the shapes and forms that we got and take. It will automatically play out in a good natured way. People need to understand that things have to take place in the spirit realm, because this is where we actually live. So don't place no blame on the shapes and forms you see in front of you. You might see a person with a lot of things, and you want to place blame on that. When really that ain't got nothing to do with why that person got it. That person is in a spirit, in the astral realm, that's in a location that's able to attract these things. Now, whether that person is lost in the physical or not, we're going to know based upon what they do with these things. But we can't go saying that this person is wrong or right about how they went about getting the thing, because if they got it, 9 times out of 10, the outside energy was resonating with them to get it. You see what I'm saying? Now, there's a bunch of different energies out here. That's what you need to understand for the most part. But that's for your own path. You see what I'm saying? Can't nobody tell you that path. They can only bring you to the water, but you have to experience the drinking. You see, you have to experience how to swim. So that's basically what I do. Now, once you get there, once I tell you about the spirit, now you working with the shits now. But so you're going to know if you're working with evil spirits or you're working with good spirits, because you're going to know what kind of experiences you're manifesting on your way of getting to wherever you need to get. But what you need to understand is that is life. Don't attach no other type shit to it. That is life. You see what I'm saying? That ain't no, well, this is bad and this is good and this is more. No, this is what you are experiencing. This is what you signed up for, and this is what you're gonna learn only to yourself what was right or wrong. Now, you got some people who get too blind and like to be stubborn, and they may know they doing wrong shit and keep doing wrong, and that's when God, which is no thing, not nothing, no thing, no shape and form, comes into that person in a more dense and take a heavier dense body. Keyword: take, possess, intake. Go into a heavier body, whatever form it is, whether it's through a situation, circumstance, through a person, place, or thing, an idea, and come to that person in a way to show that person that you have reached a limit and a boundary. And this expansion and contraction is not favorable to you, because if you go over this cliff, you're going to transform out of this body and you're going to be a spirit. And if you ain't developed enough information in that body to know how to take a greater body, then you're going to come back into another form of those body, into another person or whatever like that, and to experience it again. The same way how your cells die in you, and then the spirit that took those take another cell body. Just like you are a cell now, same thing. But for the most part, you go by frequency vibration. So since you in 3D right now, all the physical forms with souls that you see right now was physical forms that you may have took already, or that you may got risen to a human body, but you didn't leave those animalistic nature ways, so your spirit got attracted back to one of those bodies because you ain't learned nothing. So you may still act like you may have ascended and got to a human at this level as a spirit and made one of these brains and bodies, right? But say you still act like a bitch, you know what I'm saying? Or say you still act like a leech, you know what I'm saying? You still act like a motherfucking tick, politic. You still act like a motherfucking whale. You still act like a fucking snake. You still act like a motherfucker. You see what I'm saying? And if you don't you still act like a pig, right? And if you don't never detach from these things, see, you in a higher realm now, so it's going to be perceived different. See, you're not in the 4th, 5th dimension yet, where you're seeing dragons and unicorns, but they real. I'm telling you that. In the 3rd dimension, when you was in the other dimensions, you ain't think the shit that I'm talking about now probably was real. But for the most part, once you in the 3rd dimension and you in a human body, you got the perception of reasoning and the perception of being able to understand your surroundings and be able to become an individual soul and not just be ran totally by the oversoul like an animal and things of that nature. So for the most part, when you get into this vibration, right, you're seeing the higher concept of the animalistic natures. So you can still be in these animalistic natures, just not in that body. So you're doing it in a higher version way, because you're in a higher evolution. You got an alpha brain wave compared to a animal brain. You know what I'm saying? You're a bigger star than a motherfucking animal. You know what I'm saying? But if you stay stuck in your animalistic ways, because you may have just left from that body or some of an animal, and if you got here and you still not learning how to separate from those experiences, and you still diving into those animalistic experiences, if you acting like a leech, a pig, a snake, a tick, whatever like that, you know what I'm saying? Then motherfucker, you ain't developing enough information because you ain't learning in this motherfucking life, so your spirit ain't expanding. So when you might die and then your spirit's still small as fuck, can't even take a bigger body, your ass, then it might be not even big enough. You might so much of a bird brain that your ass you couldn't even take another human body. You go back into a motherfucking bird or something. You go back into a bitch, or just a dog, or you go back into a motherfucking a leech. actual leech, because your ass was being a sucker by being a motherfucking parasite to people, places, and things and shit like that too much in the human body, and you wasn't learning to detach from that shit, so you wasn't going to new experiences. But it goes motherfucking deep for real. So you have to understand this shit, that you are just a spirit taking different shapes and forms, different cells, different bodies, going through different existences. And right now, the more influences that you can impact on the earth right now, then whatever, when you ascend, you could be remembered. And the more vibration and attention and things that you could be remembered, you could be developed to actually be seen from a lesser life by close range or telescope or something like that. But you'll be in another level of life, because you'll be seeing it from another realm of reality. Because when you go up there, and in that kind of body and shit, when you a spirit taking those bodies up there, you reflect off light, and the lights that's bouncing off, and then the worlds that y'all in is in that perception. But it's a bigger perception than this perception. You see what I'm saying? But yeah, it goes deep, nigga. Flight boss, bitch. Goddamn, man.